Well, hello, hello, and hello. I tell you, every time I see that promo video, I am excited all over again about where we will be in 19 days. Can you believe it? 19 days out, and we are going to be in paradise. And you can still join us at the I Am That Woman retreat, our fifth annual retreat. We've been to Mexico, we have been to Florida, we have been to Arizona. And now we are going to the USVI, not only St. Thomas, but also St. John. And I hope that you are going to be joining us. And if you're already registered, whoo, I know, sister, you cannot wait to see these amazing speakers, our content, our resort, our destination. All of it is going to be absolutely amazing. Well, I'm Twyla Jenkins. I'm the founder and CEO of the I Am That Woman movement and retreat. And I'm excited to be here with you to share our mission. And our mission is to provide information, resources, and events for women in leadership to help them live more holistically. I'm excited about our guest today, Dr. Jeanne Porter King, who's also one of our powerhouse speakers at this year's retreat. And I'm excited about Dr. Jeanne joining us today to talk about career and wellness. And how do we integrate that? Many of us are in our careers, climbing the corporate ladder, being entrepreneurs, taking care of our communities. But what we know for sure is we don't always take care of ourselves, right? We have a problem with putting our oxygen mask on first. And that is what today's conversation is about: career wellness, integrating life, work, and well being. How do you integrate both your work life, your career life, and your personal life when it comes to your well being? I think that's a really important topic. And that's also why we have the I Am That Woman retreat. It is time for you to put your oxygen mask on, do some deep self discovery that we oftentimes don't do, as well as take some time for those 6 core pillars of wellness. That is the focus of our retreat: mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, physical, and nutritional well being. It's for your personal and professional development. Guess what? What we say is you can't be your best professional self if you are not your best personal self. So let's bring both to the table, incorporate them, and make sure that we are living our best life that God designed us to be. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring our number one lady on the stage today, and that is Dr. Jeanne Porter King. Hello, my sister.
Hello, how are you, Twyler? Thank you for having me on your program.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to be here. 19 days, Dr. Jeanne, 19 days.
19 days, and we'll be in the beautiful U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yes, I cannot wait. Before we get too far into today's discussion, let's talk about who you are. Give our audience a little insight on who is Dr. Jeanne Porter King.
Sure. Dr. Jeanne Porter King. I like to say that I minister in the marketplace and in the church. I am the founder of Transporter Group, Inc., which is a leadership and organizational development consulting firm and boutique consulting. And I do a lot around leadership development, especially for women's leadership, both strategic leadership development for organizations, corporate organizations primarily. Some work still with church organizations, and then a lot of coaching. I am a board certified coach. I serve as the executive pastor at Christ Community Church in South Holland, where my husband, Dr. Carl King, is the senior pastor. And I do the leadership development and teaching and speaking there at Christ Community also.
Sam, so you have a full plate yourself.
I do. I do. I believe that I am flowing in my calling, and my calling or vocation extended past the four walls of the church out into the broader world, and therefore having kingdom work.
Yeah, and I believe the same thing with the I Am That Woman movement and retreat, which is why we have such like minded and share some of the same missions and goals, and that is to help us to live. Dr. Jean, one thing that you shared, which both of us in my calling, to the marketplace. You're in the church in the marketplace. And while I don't do a lot of ministry in the church, certainly this is the marketplace. Grew up in the church. My dad was a PAW bishop. My mom is an evangelist. So I think we have that similarities in our backgrounds. But as well, women in wellness. So for me, I have been in an industry, corporate meeting planning that is very stressful, and since 2001. And what I would find every time I would go to the doctors and kind of talk about my life and, all the things that I was going through, it was just another prescription. And it got to the point where I basically was being described. Sorry, my camera's going crazy here. Being prescribed um, meds to wake up, meds to go to sleep, meds to stay up. And I was like, this can't be functional. This can't be holistic, certainly. And I also said this can't be long term. This
Mhm,
cannot be a long term solution, right?
mhm, mhm,
And I started looking into health and wellness. I have
mhm.
no idea what my camera's doing, you guys. I am so sorry. I'm trying to just focus it on me. Sometimes it picks up things in the background, so it's trying to focus. But I also realized that I was losing a lot of friends, right?
Mm,
Chronic diseases, right?
mhm, mhm, mhm,
I saw climbing that ladder, women who I saw had excelled in
mhm,
their businesses, but started to develop very chronic diseases and either had strokes, either heart disease, breast cancer, obesity. So, a lot of things that were related to what they were doing in their professional life.
mhm.
And so I said, there's got to be another way. Like this, I know going to the doctor, I'm just getting another prescription. And I'm talking about from Prozac to Zoloft to Xanax, you name it. And then sleep aids. And then we know that what we eat and consume also impacts us. What have you found in regards to women and their careers and their health? And statistically, what does that even look like? And especially for Black women, if you have any information on that.
Sure. Let me back up a little and just even, I appreciate your story and your transparency as to what brought you into this health and wellness field. For me, I actually had committed to, I didn't have the formal training or the even the formal rubrics, but there was something, probably the number of chronic issues that ran in my family. I tried to take care of my health and be physically fit for most of my adult life. I played sports in high school, and my first physical ed class at the Ohio State University. I know you're from Indiana, but this one was called Fit for Life. And at 18 years old, I'm taking this gym class thinking about fitness for life. And that was the extent. I'm not suggesting I went and got any certification, but I tried to stay healthy. I remember in my mid 20s, maybe about 22, 23, I took red meat and pork out of my diet. I have not eaten red meat and pork since my 20s, and just recently became a vegan. Let me say it this way: I've adopted a plant based diet and fish to control cholesterol. So I've always tried to do things more naturally. And primarily, we come up in very similar faith traditions. I raised PAW also. And so, as a career professional who did this work, the fitness side, the eating side, the health side It was more the stress of the corporate life that would get to me, and really being bivocational, doing this work in the church and then just traveling extensively in the corporate arena. And so I gradually started my own company and had more control over how I lived my life, right? And led. So it so happens about 7 years ago, I running my business as well as teaching as an adjunct at one of the universities, the seminaries here. I received a call from a dear, very dear friend. She had been diagnosed with a late stage cancer, and we walked together through this journey. She didn't live in the area, but we talked regularly. She passed February 15th. A month later, another dear friend that we had worked very closely together on our doctorates at the same time, she passed again, a late stage cancer that was diagnosed. They went quickly. Twice, that was a wake up call for me. When I looked and said, these sisters, they were Christian women, both in ministry and working in the marketplace in very senior roles. I began to say, Lord, what's happening? And so I began to look and research, number one, our stats. I'll share that for you. And then begin to look at what can we do differently. For me, it was a wake-up call that said, I wanted to make sure that I incorporated wellness into my leadership and help other women to do so. But that year that my friend, that range in which they both passed from 1999 to 2020, the death rate of Black working age women was 47% higher than that of white women. Think about that. Over a decade ago, scientists have explored a link between stress and aging in Black women, finding that at ages 49 through 55, those are the range my friends were in, Black women are 7.5 years biologically older than white women because of stress induced aging. And I'm doing more research. I ended up learning about this thing called, number one, the weathering effect. The weathering effect is the wear and tear on our body, our internal organs from stress, and the allostatic load that is placed on our organs and our internal bodies, if you will, due to stress. Consequently, Lottie Joyner of The Root, she ended up again looking at this and said extreme stress causes wear and tear on our internal organs, contributing to heart disease, high blood pressure, and stroke in Black women, all diseases of aging. She adds that the cumulative impact of overexposure to stress hormones takes a toll on the body and contributes to the development or progression of such ailments as cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, susceptibility to infection, carcinogenesis, and accelerated aging. That was a wake up call. That's data and stats that say we as Black women, especially, are subjected to stress on a number of fronts, but one or many is a result of our very being who we are as Black women living in the world, subjected to microaggressions and macroaggressions, having to, in whether it's the workplace, of a corporation or a small business, we're often navigating those biases and those whatever in such a way that I found we've got to find a way to mitigate that stress, deal with these issues in a way that does not take our lives.
That is so true. And that is even why I believe God has both of us doing this work, because there
Yeah.
is so much work to be done. And I think education is the first part of this, because I have heard some of my board members say when they tell women about the retreat, one of their reactions is, well, why do we need this? So I
Mm,
don't even know if we know as a culture and as Black women who are working, who are again, climbing the corporate ladder, taking care of our communities, taking care of our churches. I don't even know, to your point, it was a wake up call for you because you had just lost two friends. It was a wake up call for me because I started seeing my doctor's solutions not being viable
Yeah.
solutions for my long-term health.
Hmm.
But those statistics are staggering.
And
And
there are
I think,
more. I just shared a few.
right, that's just a few. And I think the wake up part of what we need to do a better job at, Dr. Jean, if you would agree, is educating us. Like this is serious. And it's not something that mainstream is going to educate us on. This is something that we have to do ourselves. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you. Educating, coaching. I write, I've written in the area of women in leadership for 20 something years, 2 decades. My first book came out in 2000, Leading Ladies, Transformative Biblical Images for Women's Leadership. So I've all, and have a business book out, Influence Starts with I. So leadership development has been kind of a mainstay for me for decades. And to your point, it's been in the last 7 years that I went to integrate then this wellness component because I was good at, I'm a certified coach. I can not just train, but coach on leadership competencies. I have helped companies and organizations develop their leadership competency models. And typically, those looked at leading the organization and leading others, and more so recently, this notion of leading self, which is where we position what we do. And a part of leading self is about having this, what I consider a holistic approach to leadership that says, I, number one, see myself as a whole person, spirit, soul, and body. I always privilege the spirit as a spirit led, spirit filled leader, right?
That's
Spirit,
right.
soul, and body. But I also see the people I lead as holistic people. And so some leaders or managers drive their people as if they're another widget in a machine. It's a very mechanistic approach to leadership versus an organic or what I call holistic approach. But I also
Wow.
recognize that as a leader, there's an interaction between me and the environment or the context in which I lead. It has an effect on me, and I have an ability to influence that. So as we begin to look more systemically and more holistically about where we lead, I call it the three, the who, what, and how of leadership. That is, makes it holistic, but that gives us the permission and it opens the avenue to begin to talk about our whole selves and what it means to be well in our careers, our jobs, or our vocations.
And oftentimes, what are you finding? So when you start your coaching, and I would be interested too. Let me back up. In the last 7 years, you've kind of reincorporated this. So this was right before the pandemic that
Yes,
wellness kind of
yes,
started to come a notion that
yes.
one is literally tied to the other. Because these women who are leading well in their careers oftentimes are not leading well in their health and wellness, which is why we do the work that we do. And sometimes, we keep the faith, but and we have to keep the faith because I think what our divine assignment is, because it hasn't been at the forefront and it hasn't been how we, especially as Black women, women altogether, but statistically you can tell that we have there's a greater impact of the stress on us from our health statistics than some others, but all women are dealing with this. But we're just gonna just pigeon to Black women in particular, that it's not natural for us to lead with our health and wellness, that we take care of everybody else,
Mm.
but we don't take care of ourselves. And then to kind of preach and teach that, it's not always an easy thing for us to accept and do. So where do you say that we are in these 7 years? Kind of where are we now? Are we getting better at taking care of ourselves?
Yeah, I think it was very astute of you to catch that I started this before the pandemic. 2017 is when this happened. That same year, my brother, who he may see this rebroadcast, he was diagnosed with a stage 3 cancer. We prayed him through. Thank God he's now 5 or 6 years cancer free. The best treatments there at the James Cancer Center in Columbus, Ohio. But again, that was before the pandemic. I began to search and really pray. And the Lord led me to this idea that if we as believers truly were following and flowing in the Spirit, He took me to the woman at the well. And we at my church, then I took the women of our church through a year-long series on what we called the Well Woman series. And the well woman was one who sat at the well and was also the well of the living water flowed through her. But that living water then would flow out into the what you call your 5 or 6 pillars. They would flow out. So for me, I always center spiritual wellness, and then that anchors us, because when we get our minds right, our thinking right, our sense of identity, we stop comparing and keeping up. We can then focus on the other areas. We also get free that if there's a mental and emotional issue we need, we're free to go ahead and talk to a therapist and talk to a counselor. Where some churches in a religious thinking, a rigid religiosity, poo-pooed that. We're talking about being whole beings. And one of my sisters in ministry, back from Ohio, also PAW, placed on her Facebook page yesterday that if we had, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was if we had a headache, we wouldn't hesitate to go to a doctor, get some aspirin, whatever. But when we're feeling sad or down or lonely, we need to be just as comfortable going to talk to a therapist, etc. And so that year was a groundswell, radical shift in my approach to leadership. So consequently, I'd already started integrating these things. When March 2020, they shut down the world, I had to pivot my entire company. I had already sent materials to one client because I was a developer that would go on site and do in-person workshops, learning experiences. And so lo and behold, they had to cancel, but they said, "But can you do this virtually?" I don't think I'd ever done a virtual training before, but I said, "Absolutely, we will figure it out."
Right.
And she had to go to her upper management, should we go on with this? And finally she said, Dr. Jeanne, we're going to go on with this because having a leadership development course, and it was a day long, will be a good type of self-care for our leaders given what's going on. So it was almost pathetic that I'd already started in this area, and that quickly a corporate leader saw the value. That year, for the rest of the year, and almost every leadership course that I led, we had to take time to process where they were. Many of them had to navigate their employees through deaths, through their own COVID. Remember, before we had vaccinations and stuff, people were not only dying, yes, or getting so sick that long COVID was affecting them. And because we were working from home, there was no work-life separation. Work had come to our homes, right? And so we had to do that. And I promised myself that this would not be an event. And I love that your I Am That Woman is a movement, that this had to be an ongoing process. It was a shift in the way that I approach leadership. So I have a coaching program right now called Empowered to Lead Well. And I'm going to give early career or mid-career emerging leaders, early career emerging leaders, mid-career existing leaders who want to hone their leadership. I'm going to give you some good leadership principles and practices. I'm going to give you an assessment that will let you know where you are. I will train on competencies, and I have 6 in particular that our program is centered around. One of those competencies now, Twyler, is um, a healthy leading in a healthy way, the developing and maintaining a self-care plan, that has to be not an adjunct or an add-on. It has to be integrated into your leadership development, that you're intentional, strategic about it. Because as we heard on the debate the other day, if you only have a concept of a plan, it's not a plan.
Amy, it is not a plan. It is a concept.
It's a
And we
concept.
have to have a plan for our self care. We have to have a plan for our wellness.
You
And
have to have,
especially those,
yes.
something I heard just yesterday, and it hit me hard. There was a colleague who said that she sends emails. She had told another colleague that she sends emails in the middle of the night, or she stays up all night, and that she's always working because it was impressive to the client. I was like, well, is it going? And she had just not long ago been hospitalized through the ER. And I said, because you're not getting enough rest,
Right,
right?
right.
And so if you have an occasional, like this week, I had a occasional 2 hour sleep, but you best believe
Yes.
I'm going to take the
Yes.
time I had gone. And the reason why, let me even say, the reason why my night went so long is because I went to acupuncture for 2 hours kind of in the middle of my day, right? So I
Mm,
was doing some self
mm,
care, and then
mhm,
I ended up coming home from that and resting a
mhm,
while. And
mhm.
then even after that rest, I was able to I kind of worked some long hours. But I don't understand why people think that driving their bodies to the point of being on the brink of life, literally, is how they want to live. And that is not leading well. That is not living well.
It's not leading, living, or being well, but it is the culture of some workplaces. So I even share a story in my book, Leading Well, in which I cut my teeth in organization effectiveness, organizational development, sometimes in house with large firms. And one time I was blessed to really take my consulting to another level. I was with one of the big five consulting firms. And there was this thing called FaceTime. It was, and we were not talking about Apple FaceTime. We are talking about junior colleagues would stay in the office to have their face seen by their superiors to prove their commitment, number one. Or there was this competition. So this is all about cultural value, organizational cultural values. They espouse one thing, but it's demonstrated in how they live out. There was this other thing that we might have, have a colleague who's working on a proposal for a client, and we would lament, I had to leave I was up all night, working, and it was almost a badge of honor. And, one might say I was up all night working on my part of the proposal. Another said, well, I left at 5 and I had to go home and get the kids dinner. And then I stayed up. And it was like a competition, who stayed up the longest, who put the most work in, because their worth was based on that performance and that outward. Whereas we're shifting now. Number one, look at Microsoft Outlook as an example. You go to send an email at 9 o'clock at night, even Outlook is going to say, please consider sending this during work hours. That some of these principles and concepts of the holistic approach are even
Yes.
being embedded into our technology. So I
Yes.
remember working for someone who drove us like that. Twyla, I lasted 7 months with that place. There was no way I felt like I was part of cattle being herded. And even before I had the language, I had the courage. Dr. Nicholas Pierce has a book, The Purpose Path, and he talks about vocational courage, the courage to follow one's vocation and one's calling, whether it's in the marketplace or wherever it is. And I remember having the courage to leave there because that was not sustainable for me. That was not how I wanted to live, even before I had this language. So these lights are a little bright.
That's okay. You look beautiful. And so vocational courage, and that hits home with me because
Mhm.
God is testing me. I mean, I'm working in it, but I also still have my corporate meeting planning career. So for all of those women out there who's kind of at that crossroad of, do I do what I've always done? Or do I have the vocational courage to step into and step out on faith to do what God may be calling me to do? That's what I love about the I Am That Woman retreat. It is to help us to get to our next, because a lot of times at certain points and career points in our lives, we have the battle scars of being that woman who was staying late, coming in early last month to leave, trying to fit our doctor's appointments in, not getting the best test results, and understanding that something had to change. Or if you keep going down that path, that it's not going to serve your highest good on your health and wellness. Are you finding now that more women are having that vocational courage in your coaching and in those that you are seeing in the circles of career life? Are you seeing that more women are having the courage to say, I'm not going to live my life like this? I'm not going to be a cattle herder. I'm not, going to stay up all night to prove to you my worth. I'm going to get my work done, but I don't think it requires it being at the risk of our health and wellness.
Yeah, I think that I am seeing. I think there are people who have come to my coaching program who are willing to examine these principles and integrate them. Now, also, don't forget, especially in early careers, sometimes as we are carving out our careers and we're learning and navigating, even as the president CEO of my own company, now I put in some long hours and I love what I do as a minister, preparing sermons, reading. I'm a reader, I'm an author. And so I put in, and so I'm not suggesting that, anyone's going to be able to perhaps do what they need to do in a strict 9 to 5, and then we go home.
Sure.
I think
Right.
the key is, and I wanted to leave that with your listeners. I think the key is understanding your purpose. And for me, I always situate it as leadership purpose. We have these 6 principles in my program. That the first is understanding and embracing your authentic identity, and then embracing your leadership purpose. So we spend some time helping people really unpack purpose. From there, developing a support system or network, and then recognizing opportunities. That often these are things God lays along our paths, but they're also that comes from people in our support or what have you, but recognize them and being able to move in that direction. But also recognizing and then navigating the barriers. There are going to be barriers in our lives. You don't want those barriers, even if they come from the intersection of racism and sexism. You can't let that get us off our game anymore, and even cause us to react. I won't go into that debate again, but we have to be able to handle ourselves and not allow other people's biases to live in our heads. And then that last is really creating and maintaining a self-care plan. And I said all that to say that I do think that the core is knowing who you are, whose you are, knowing your purpose, and then finding that wherever you are, if your purpose aligns with, say, the mission and the purpose of the organization. I heard one executive say, you're going to find a path forward. Yes, you're going to put in some hours. You're going to demonstrate your competencies and make great strides for the organization. But as you said it earlier, you don't want it to come at the expense or cost of your health. And so
Mhm.
that's where this notion of holistic leadership and doing it in a certain way. And I think as a result of the pandemic, more and more executives, leaders, and managers not only are we accepting it, and we're getting more people, women, Black women especially, who are getting on board with it. I'm seeing more and more clients that are also integrating it because we went through a global pandemic that shifted the way we live in the world, the way we see, and our workplaces had to catch up with that also. That's why we're not 100% back in the office. We're at hybrid, even though some companies are saying, oh, we need to be back. The reality is we've shifted how we work. And I think this notion of being more holistic is part of that shift.
I would agree. And there's a question: what if that stressful job is a necessity? And it was followed up by, like, can I tell, ComEd and the mortgage company? So you talked a little bit about purpose, but go ahead. Let me
Yeah, so
answer.
I appreciate that question, Lester Coleman. Um, I would ask you to perhaps get a support system that you learn to manage and mitigate the stress differently. Stress can be seen as the perceptions that we have about the demands placed upon us, right? And someone recently, I was in heard a sermon the other day. This thing resonated with me so, and she said, "Perception is what we see. Perspective is what we think about our seeing." So there's a way to have a demanding job, those of us that are highly competent, and even we have demands on our jobs. There's a way to mitigate some of the stress in how we both see the demands and then how we try to protect our bodies. So mindfulness exercises, deep breathing, boundaries. So I don't care how stressful the job is, you do have the right to manage the boundaries. And no, let's not get sarcastic and think that we're going to tell ComEd and the mortgage company that we're not going to pay them because we need a break. But the reality is there's a path that seems right to a man. There is a way that seems right. But I believe if we get really serious about trying to do this differently, that there's a way to do it. And for some that have started small businesses, have laid the foundation, and yes, it was maybe grueling for a couple of years. They planted the seeds, and the harvest has come. It means you need a good network of coach, mentors, therapists, but there's a way to do it. You don't automatically assume anymore that I'm going to sacrifice my being at the altar of capitalism.
Yes, 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 yes. I can say that. Oh my goodness. All right, there's questions coming in. Our younger generation seems to have more stress because of social media. What would be your advice? Even if it is younger generations have many things these days when it comes to work. I was having this conversation earlier because to me, they want more money for less work, but I'm of a different generation. So stress to them is completely different than the stress that I went through. But I'm of a different generation. But to Shai's point, the younger generation seems to have more stress because of social media. And I think I'm certainly going to let you, the expert, to talk about that. I think a lot of that to me deals with what they're trying to keep up with and what they're trying to see. And you just talked about that perspective, right? And so, but let me have you answer the question.
Well, I first of all am probably not so hard on the younger generation, probably because I have nieces that I'm mentoring and coaching, and you know, I don't think they're as all of them. I don't think when we look at generations in the workplace, we have to be careful not to stereotype any generational group. So we just want to be careful there. And because of the cross sectional, diagonal slice type of training programs that I do in the corporate arena, there's often a Gen Z or a young millennial. And I get the great fortune to really hear from them. And again, like I said, with my nieces and goddaughters, they are working hard and getting the education and demonstrating their value to the organization. But I do think they've also brought some powerful things to us. I have a sister-in-law who's an HR manager, and we talk about this. In some ways, they are more open about the issues that they face. And so they're really quick to maybe talk about some of their diagnoses. And that has become popular on social media. So in one sense, some would say they're more stressed. Some are more stressed with social media because they're trying to keep up. They're spending an inordinate amount of time on it, perhaps, or some of the trends in social media, they're trying to be in the workplace. We have to train managers how to navigate that and manage it, and have to coach them and train them on what's acceptable in the particular workplace they're in, right? So it's, you and I came from a different generation and we paid some prices, but we were young at one time too and had some expectations, that we were going to do certain things. And so some of that's just a developmental stage they're in. Some of it is this social media saturated age that we have to leverage it in good ways and maybe help them to do that, right? But I think the biggest thing is helping all generations develop boundaries. There's a book I want your readers to think about. It's called Real Self-Care. It's by Dr. Lakshmi Pooja, Pooja. She's an Indian American woman. And she says there are four key elements to real self-care. And the number one thing is boundaries, being able to set them, manage them, know what real boundaries are. Having self-compassion is another, that you come to believe that I really deserve these boundaries. And using our power, being empowered to be able to use my voice in my best interest. So those are just three of the ones that really stood out with me. But I think we need a lot more work around boundary management and in and out of the marketplace.
Another question that came in is, how do we introduce this to corporate America gracefully? Where do we start?
Well, I think it starts with people who are already inside of corporate America doing the work in areas that are about talent development or about organizational culture. There are many workplaces now that have a workplace wellness movement. And so they are literally looking at professionals who can help bring workplace wellness principles, practices to their workplaces. Do all workplaces have them? Not yet. So, number one, I think we start with those insiders that are there already doing work around companies' number one assets. What's companies' number one assets? Their people. And the way we keep our people, the way we reduce turnover, the ways in which we help people feel a sense of belonging and contribution, they need to be well. I mean, it's a holistic approach. So we can start with HR, talent managers, integrating these principles. I'm talking with a client now about to develop a leadership development program, and I love it. She's finishing up her doctorate. And as we were looking at some of the leadership principles we might put in this program, she said, "Oh, I want to put some mindfulness practices in." That's how you start. You begin to hire people who believe that way. But she said, but they're not ready for that. I said, oh, I know they're not, but here's how I've done it. I've worked with some very conservative organizations, and I didn't call it mindfulness, but what I did is said, managers, leaders, you need to carve out time each day to think about your thinking. It was more along the idea of strategic thinking, but it would still take a break from meeting after meeting after meeting, and take a deep breath and begin to think about your thinking. Slow it down for a moment. And it went over well because it was about strategic thinking. And I was to develop these emerging leaders around strategic planning and strategic thinking. Well, you can't be a strategist if you've not carved out some time to think. So again, start with those that are there. Number two, look at organizations. There are organizations that are serving corporations in this way. Let's align with those. You and I see that Dr. Portia is on.
Yes.
The three of us need to find these organizations that are looking for people to do what we do, right? but we're beginning
Absolutely.
to, yeah, we're beginning to get into that more and more into that arena. Yeah, so that's what I would say there. And then I think through our own social media, I think what you're doing, I want to commend you to continue to do what you're doing. And having these types of conversations, you're really active on social media, and all of them, including LinkedIn, where we see more corporate professionals who will be affected by your messages. I think we have to continue to do that. I think we have to continue to write. I really believe part of my calling, I'm grateful that I am on my eighth, I just released my eighth book. And this one is around, caregivers. And it's called Caring Well. But here's the truth of the matter. When I was caring for my mother in my home, my husband and I brought her into our home, and his parents were seniors, and there was times that I'm caring for my mother and he's going to see about his 90-something-year-old father in the hospital. Guess what? We were still working professionals. He was a pastor. I'm running a business. I'm having Zoom calls with CEOs of organizations. The reality is, we as women leaders are also called upon to provide care. So it is, according to AARP, a major issue that we need to be concerned about, not just for an aging population, but I'd say for working people who are younger and younger, having to take care of aging parents. And Christianity Today did a big spread saying we also need to address it from a spiritual standpoint, where you and I and Dr. Portia would say we think you need to address it from a holistic standpoint: spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, etc. And that's what my Caring Well book is really about, because the reality is, we as professional women are going to be caring for someone, and we need to learn to care for ourselves just as well.
That is so true. That's what the I Am That Woman movement is all about. And I think I heard a collaboration brewing
I
right
know,
there.
right?
I think I heard a part of a what's next for us
I know,
kind
right?
of simmering. So Dr. Lockett, glad you are here, praying that you are feeling better. She did our information session last night and she wasn't feeling well and had gotten some test results back on that
Mm,
COVID thing. So I'm praying that you are feeling better. I've had so many colleagues going through COVID right now. So just praying
mm.
for all of you guys. Another very good question that came in: how is all of this applicable to small businesses with small staff?
It is applicable, Lester Coleman. Number one, as a boutique consulting firm, I'm a small business with a small staff, and I primarily have contract employees. It's applicable because it starts with you. This is not about what someone else is doing. It's about how you lead, how you model, even with your small staff. Small things that you can do. It's applicable to the small pastor, the small church pastor. It's, do you take care? How do you take care of yourself? And then model it for your staffs to show that it's okay, that they need to do it also. It's applicable in how we approach one another. It's applicable in how we carve out time in the morning to care for ourselves, to, as Twyler said earlier, get enough sleep. In one of the devotions in Caring Well, I give the stats on what sleep does for our bodies. God created us to sleep and to regroup and to be healed in many ways. When we think about rest, think about the God of the universe created the world in 6 days, and then God rested. Dr. Renita Weems one time said in one of her blogs, even God rested, right? And when God not only gave a commandment, think about this, a commandment, not even a suggestion, it's a commandment, to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. But later, as they have come out of Egypt and they're going to the promised land, he told them, he reinstituted, stressed the Sabbath, because he said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't want you to be enslaved to anyone. I brought you out of enslavement. And by having a Sabbath, a time in which you rest and you honor your body, you are resisting the forces of enslavement that will have you work 24/7, that will have you in bondage to things, that will have you in bondage to mammon. So I think it's very applicable, Lester, and I hope I've given you some examples how I live and lead my company, or you lead a small business, models to your staff that they're important and you value them and you see them as whole beings and not just widgets for your success. And we do it by the way we talk with one another. We do it in those pillars that Twyla talks about, the physical, getting enough rest and sleep, eating well, having some boundaries, even in our work hours, not having blow ups at work in which we're yelling at people. That's a sign that you're leading on empty and stressed and stretched out. That's not a healthy workplace, right? It's all applicable because it's part of leadership and managing. We lead people, we manage processes. And so part of leading people is we want to lead well and lead in ways that they can be well.
Absolutely. You have so many books. Someone wants to know, Shai wants to know, which book will you have at the retreat?
You asked me to deal with career wellness, so I will have Leading Well, a Black woman's guide to holistic barrier breaking leadership. And man, this for me, I birthed this thing. I birthed these last two books, and I'm so grateful to have had great partners, both publishers. Leading Well was with Baker Book Publishing, a wonderful Christian publishing, probably the largest independent Christian publishing company. And then Caring Well with Our Daily Bread. They do the best devotions. And I just have been blessed to work with these two wonderful publishing partners. But I'll have Leading Well. You actually are providing, thank you. You're going to be providing a book for each person. And I'll show them at the retreat how they can get Caring Well. For those that are caregivers, I think
And we have a lot. I was even going to suggest perhaps if you can just bring some with you, and then yeah, and then for those when you sell out with the number that you bring, you can even tell them because we have so many women, for obvious reasons in our demographic who are taking care of their parents
Yep.
and or grandchildren.
Yep.
Right. So
Yep.
there are a lot of 50s, 60s, and
Yep.
certainly older women who are, some men, of course, too, who are taking care of their parents, their grandchildren,
Yes.
still even their adult children. So leading well, being a caretaker comes in many forms, and so I think it would definitely be good. These are some great questions. All right, Lester. So the method of the beatings will continue until moral improves doesn't work.
Right. So, Lester, what I hear you saying, so the method of beatings will continue until morale improves, doesn't work.
Morale
You're
improves.
absolutely right. It does not work. That command and control style of leadership does not work anymore, if it ever did work. And the reality is, you have a more educated, even if it's not a formal education. Again, back to social media, folks know stuff. And command and
Right.
control is not going to work anymore. And if anything, being able to engage them in the work, have a sense of ownership and belonging and contribution is going to be the best for the organization. And no, the beatings cannot continue, please.
I think something else that happened during the pandemic is people kind of had this awakening and realizing that I don't have to do this. Like I can make some decisions that doesn't require me to be the slave and to endure these beatings anymore. Like I think people's lives shifted being at home and they realized even in the limitations of what it means to go outside. One thing that I witnessed, I live right across from a park. I've lived here since 2005, 2006. And I have to say, I'd never seen as many families in that park together than what I did
Mhm,
during the pandemic. And now,
mhm,
slowly but surely, we've gotten back to I can go walking in the park and I'm the only soul out
mhm,
there.
mhm,
And so,
mhm.
it's unfortunate that we've gone back to the busy and everything else and not spending that time with our families. But I think some families had a wake up call during the
Mhm.
pandemic, like, wait a minute, I don't have to do this. I really do have some choices. And something that Shy built on when you were talking about sleep and the commandment of the Sabbath, she was amazed God said the evening was the first day. The new day begins while you sleep.
Shy, that is so insightful, because some have argued that after God created humans, man and woman, and woman, um, on that sixth day, to your point, that the first day of their lives was about rest. So I began to, I can't remember who I first saw make that point in a book, but that was just like, just a mind shift, paradigm shift, that the very first task was to rest. Then we were to care for the garden, et cetera, et cetera. So awesome, Shy.
She's so enlightened. All right, I don't see any more questions coming in. Lester's giving you nothing but smiley faces, so I guess you answered his questions
Thank you,
well.
Lester.
This has been an amazing conversation. I always try and leave it. I try and contain it to 30 minutes because I'm like, people's attention spans aren't that long. But when questions come in and there's
Yes.
such great questions, I just let God do what God does. And so I don't restrict it to a certain amount of time. Dr. Jeanne, I'm excited about you joining us in 19 days at the I Am That Woman retreat. I think we are going to get so much from your two-part professional and personal development series. Not
Mhm.
just are you teaching on Thursday, you're also teaching on Saturday. And so for the women who may be listening in the USVI, if you are local in St. Thomas or St. John, we have a package where you can
Ah,
come just for our sessions and
yes.
just during the days on Thursday. So you can get this professional and personal development on Thursday and on Saturday. I want to read all of your books. You are a wealth of knowledge. You are going to become my mentor. I'm announcing that. I'm saying that now because God is also, and there's room for all of us. That's what I love. I was just listening to Lisa Nichols the other day, and she was saying she's been on Oprah many, many times, and they were reaching out to her about something, and she said, "Listen, just as long as you guys aren't trying to make me Oprah, because Oprah is Oprah and Lisa is Lisa, and
Yes.
so I'll join. I'll do what it is that you want me to do, but I feel pulled to join some of these masterminds and groups
Mm,
and coaching
mhm,
that you're doing because I know it's where God is leading me. And there's
mhm,
so much work to be done.
mhm,
There needs to be more of us that
mhm,
is doing this work, especially for, of course, Black women in wellness, because we are the ones from those statistics that are suffering at the highest rates because we're not taking care of ourselves. And again, I think it begins with education, and I think those statistics are alarming, but also we can do things to help bring those numbers down. And I want that to be our mission and our passion and our drive at the I Am That Woman movement. And
mhm.
so I'm staying dedicated. I'm going to keep fighting the fight because no ministry is easy. If ministry was easy, I don't think God would have had to send Jesus.
I know, right? Okay.
It was not easy for him, so it is not going to be easy for us. But thank you again. I appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you in 19 days.
Yes.
In closing, what would you share with our listeners in closing in regards to self care?
Yes, that self care must be something that you intentionally and strategically plan for, enact, and develop habits around. Sometimes these plans don't stick because we've not shifted our mindset. So I'm big on shifting the mindset, but then developing the habits and having the accountability. So again, you do the work. I have other colleagues that do wellness coaching and be able to share anything with, your listeners. Get the support you need, but you have to be intentional about it and invest in yourself. So I hope you can join us at this particular I Am That Woman retreat. But if not, then plan for the next one. We've got to invest in ourselves. One of the reasons our health disparities are so large for Black women in the Black community isn't just that we don't know or haven't been educated or we have poor practices. There are structural reasons, there are economic reasons, there are one of the reasons caregiving is so big in our culture. I believe it's a cultural value, but let's face it, many families don't have the resources to have the outside help, and many don't want to have their loved ones in institutions or could afford really the best independent living situation. So again, some of what we've had to face, though we have many, many colleagues and friends that are clearly in that top 2% of, of wealth earners, our culture as a whole are still catching up to that. And our disparities suggest that not only is it education, it's also advocacy and it's change. So we have to start with change from the inside out and know these places that we can change systems, change approaches, and then change the ways in which we lead, in which we care, and which we live out our lives.
Yes. All right. You all heard it here first, and you can hear it again in 19 days. Go to IamThatWomanMovement.org. Register. It's not too late. We have discounted. I'm telling you, this is one of the most affordable retreats ever. So we have discounted full registration with a single room occupancy. We've discounted the full registration with the double room. So we've taken 15% off registration. If you are in the USVI, you just want to come to hear Dr. Lockett or Dr. Jeanne and Dr. Lockett and all of our other speakers, you can do that as well. Only $750 to come to all of our sessions on Thursday and on Saturday, and then only $1,870. I know that print is small. If you want to do the entire retreat without staying at the hotel, and $3,170 if you stay at the hotel in a single room, and $2,520 if you stay at the hotel in a double room. So everything that you're getting, I'm telling you, it's priceless. On this Wednesday, we are having an information session for all of the women who are in St. Thomas, St. Croix, St. John, about those special packages for you. So make sure that you join us. Geraldine said, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Shy, and all of those. I promise y'all I'm going to do a better job of marketing these conversation series in advance. When I take that full leap of faith and release this corporate job that I have, I'll have more time. So I'm speaking to myself. I'm speaking it into existence, Dr. Jeanne.
Amen. And we're gonna pray that you get a team that can do more too.
Yes, I definitely need that team. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, my sister. I will see you soon. And thank you again. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. Thank you. Continued blessings to you and all that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know I'm in her prayers. I know I stay in her prayers. I pray I stay in your prayers. And guess what? Every Monday through Friday, you can pray with us. Prayer and meditation is Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 5:30 a.m., Wednesday and Friday at 6:30 a.m. I'll have to have Dr. Jeanne be one of our guests on our prayer line one morning. Dr. Portia Lockett does the prayer every Monday. So join us. It's amazing. It's just a conference call line, 351-999-3566. Starting next year, we are going to be expanding this to an online platform. Some of you guys are familiar with Clubhouse. And so starting in 2025, we will also be offering this amazing experience on Clubhouse. So thank you, Dr. Jeanne, for joining us. For all the ladies who have not registered yet, it's not too late. You want to hurry up and register because Dr. Jeanne has some amazing information to share at the retreat. She just gave a nugget today. So you want to be there. All right. I'm going to close out with the video, the promo video, showing you one more time what we're going to be doing in 19 days. Love you all. Have a very blessed weekend. Take care.